Americans who are against the Biden student loan forgiveness. Why? I only disagree with it because it doesn't address the fundamental problem with these loans, which is the predatory interest rates that make them *amn near impossible to pay off. The government should be regulating those rates so students aren't being gouged and can actually pay the loans off with reasonable interest. Edit. Just want to clarify, I'm pro-loan relief. I just wish more was being done to address the core issue with these loans. But I would rather the government do something instead of continuing to do nothing. I'm against it as a solution, because schools will still charge $100 per year and lenders will still keep making ridiculous loans. Band-aid solution, while better than nothing, does not solve any of the root causes of the crisis, which is the unchecked guaranteed loaning practice paired with sizable interest rates. I don't disagree with it per se, but without setting up systems to keep school costs in check, we will get this crisis to reoccur every few years as college costs keep skyrocketing. Before federal student loans were guaranteed, college was nowhere near this expensive. Loan forgiveness doesn't make sense unless you also stop giving out the loans. Universities were able to increase their tuition so much because everyone was getting guaranteed student loans. And now you're putting down precedent that the loans can be forgiven. Does that sound wise to you? I think cutting the interest to 1% makes more sense. It's blatantly unconstitutional. The executive branch doesn't have the authority to unilaterally spend hundreds of billions of dollars on a student loan bailout. Putting aside if this is good policy or not, this needs to go through Congress. Former Speaker Pelosi was correct. President doesn't have this authority. Using an obscure 2003 law designed to forgive student loans for military service members whose education was disrupted during Iraq War to blanket bailout millions of student loans is a clear overstep. Furthermore, the law required there be an ongoing emergency for jurisdiction. DOJ already claimed during immigration proceedings that pandemic phase was over. Joe Biden has already gone on national TV and said pandemic was over. Can't claim we are andare not currently in an ongoing emergency to justify activating an obscure law orders of magnitude beyond its intended scope. The bailouts aren't paid for. It's just going to add hundreds of billions to national debt. A debt that our children will eventually have to pay off. Why should my 2-year-old daughter and 11-day-old son be responsible for paying off your poor economic decisions to get a low-yield degree on an unmarketable field? The bailouts do nothing to address the underlying cause of tuition inflation. With opening the box of bailing out student loan debt as a new potential mechanic in play, tuitions would likely be raised further as we are disincentivizing going into debt. As there's this looming possibility of a bailout coming, and once something happens once, maybe again. It's a wealth transfer mechanic from working people to benefit upper middle class. Why should a car mechanic be responsible for paying down or take on a portion of national debt for a nurse practitioner who is in a position to pay back their debt? Just robbing from the poorer to give to the richer. There are already laws in place to discharge student loan debts from fraudulent colleges and universities. During these talks, we hear people cite cases like ITT Tech and other predatory colleges lying about their stats and accreditation to get student enrollment. It's a blatant mistruth. Students who attended these colleges are already eligible for discharging their student loans as the colleges committed fraud. What we are discussing here are people who got degrees which may not be marketable, but nobody hid that information from them or lied to them. I got a bachelor's degree in psych. That wasn't a great decision, but also nobody else is responsible for that decision but me. If we are going to bailing people out for making bad financial decisions, when do I get my bailout check for buying $500 of GameStop stock? Being an adult means that you have the freedom to make your own life's decisions, but you are also responsible for the consequences of those decisions. Edit. Came home to 63 notifications and one person reporting my comment for self-harm. Can we just be mature enough to not report people for mental health resources just because that person disagreed with you? Are we really that fragile? I don't think it addresses any long-term issues, just symptoms. I also think it's literally just to gain midterm support. It doesn't fix the problem, which is the absurd cost. Forgiving debt probably makes it much worse. Future students are going to think they too will eventually get their loans forgiven. making them willing to borrow, spend even more. The largest benefits go to people solidly in or on their way to being among the higher earners in our country. It will exacerbate resentment of the less well-educated, who already feel they get a raw deal, further polarizing our society. I think these issues could be addressed with more thoughtful programs. I'd forgive interest only, and make future loans interest-free. But I'd also cap costs at the institution level, not just borrowing. Limits or costs paid by students, but an all-in cap that includes all tax dollars and tuition. And I'd place some default risk back on the institutions. I'd make tuition and student loan payments tax-deductible and require institutions to use their endowments to reduce costs further. I'd expand the entire program to vocational education. I'm fine with the interest being forgiven, or a good portion of it. But you weren't forced to take out the loans, that was a choice. You are responsible for your choices and debts, not the taxpayer. The real issue is let's make education more affordable. If the actual student loan program were reevaluated, loan forgiveness wouldn't be an issue. Wasn't this asked like 2 days ago? It doesn't solve the core problems with the education system being overly expensive for what IT provides. The burden of paying just gets passed on to the taxpayer, which is the middle class, because the rich can just use their money to avoid paying much of their taxes. Make the banks pay for charging excess interest, or the schools pay for giving out BS degrees that no one will hire. It is inflationary in nature. Think of what you'll do when your loan is forgiven with the new money. Now multiply it by the millions more who will be doing that same thing. You really think you'll be able to get that new car or down payment on a house, when every other person with their newly forgiven loans are doing the same thing? It is unfair for the people who paid their own way through school or already paid their loans. I'm not going to get a refund for working part-time through school to pay for my education when I could have partied instead. Yet, the inflation and taxes will affect. Ultimately, I think it's just a bad policy. It preys on voters thinking that this will just solve all of their problems when it really won't. I'm against it because the government are speaking out of both sides of their mouth. If student debt was so bad that it should be forgiven, then why are these same loans being made to new students now? I'd have some capacity for the idea if it was done after the government putting an end to any new student loans. But that's not the case. At the end of the day, the student promised to pay the debt back, so they should do so. I know thesis not a popular view, but it's quite an important moral in my view. That's not to mention that the taxpayer is going to be picking up the tab for this anyway, which is surely a good idea when we struggle as a nation, financially, as it is. Because it won't change the for-more-profit mindset of the college system at all, and will maybe even make it worse in the very near future. Yes, it'll help tons of people now, but next week? Next year? Problem not solved. What's the best comedy movie you have ever watched? Office Space. It gets better as I age and it gets more relevant. My Cousin Vinny. It's smart, it's hilarious, and it's got some superb acting in it. Airplane. One of the greatest spoof movies of all time. Haven't seen Galaxy Quest mentioned. It's hilarious. Hot Fuzz. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. Tropic Thunder. Naked Gun. The Birdcage. The way Robin Williams and Nathan Lane play off of each other is amazing, and it's easily my favorite comedy. Gene Hackman and Hank Azaria just make the movie that much better. I don't care how many times I watch it, I will always die laughing at Superbad. Scrolled forever but couldn't find, This Is Spinal Tap. That one goes to 11 every time. The Emperor's New Groove. Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I watched Best in Show for the first time 2 weeks ago. I was on a flight back home and could not stop laughing. Good stuff. Tommy Boy. The duo of Farley and Spade is phenomenal. Edgar Wright movies like Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead. Blazing Saddles, the producers Robin Hood. Men in Tights. Basically, any Mel Brooks movie will have me laughing till I cry. He's going to be sorely missed when he passes away. Trading Places. Absolutely brilliant writing. Runner-up, The Jerk. I have to go with Forgetting Sarah Marshall. I have watched it so many times, and it never gets old. Idiocracy. I couldn't breathe when I first saw this movie. I was laughing so much. It was so ridiculous, but in a good way. What We Do in the Shadows. Clue. 1985. Dumb and Dumber. Zoolander. It's such a quotable, stupid movie that captures the essence of 2000s comedy flicks.